I stood in what used to be my living room, rain soaking through my clothes, staring at splintered wood and twisted metal where my home of 40 years had been. The tornado took everything. My hands shook as I dialed my son Brian on a neighbor's phone. "The house is gone," I whispered. "I have nowhere to go." Silence stretched between us. Then his voice came back, flat and cold. "I'll call you back, Mom." I waited in the wreckage, hoping my only child would save me. 2 hours passed. 2 hours of sitting on what used to be my front porch steps, now just a slab of concrete surrounded by debris. Emergency crews worked around me, their voices distant and hollow. The rain had stopped, but I was still soaking wet, shivering despite the Oklahoma heat that followed the storm. My neighbor, Martha Patterson, had wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, but it did nothing to warm the cold spreading through my chest. When my phone finally rang, I grabbed it so fast I nearly dropped it. "Mom!" Brian's voice was tight, controlled, professional, almost. Like he was talking to a client, not his mother. "Brian, thank God." I didn't know what to do. "The insurance adjuster won't be here until tomorrow, and I can't stay here tonight. There's no roof, no walls, nothing." Another pause. I heard a woman's voice in the background. "Angela, my daughter-in-law." "Mom?" I talked to Angela. His tone shifted, became even more distant. "We want our privacy. My wife doesn't want you here. We have our own lives now. Maybe you can stay at a shelter or with your church friends." The words hit me harder than any debris from the tornado. "Brian, I'm your mother. I don't have church friends who can take me in. I just lost everything. I know it's hard, but Angela and we need our space. We're working on things. It's just not a good time. Working on things. Not a good time." I had raised this boy alone after his father died of a heart attack when Brian was only 6 years old. I worked 2 jobs, wore the same coat for 10 winters, skipped meals so he could have new shoes for school. I helped him with his college tuition when scholarships didn't cover everything. I gave him $15,000 toward his wedding, money I had saved for years. "Brian, please." "Mom," Angela's calling me. "I have to go. I'm sure you'll figure something out. You always do." The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, staring at the screen. Martha Patterson came over, her face full of concern. "Linda, honey, what did he say?" I couldn't speak. I just shook my head. "You're staying with us tonight," Martha said firmly. "No arguments. Come on." That evening, in the Pattersons' small guest room, I went through my purse. It was one of the few things I had managed to grab when I heard the tornado sirens, along with the clothes on my back and my medication. Inside was my wallet, my driver's license, my insurance card, and tucked in a small pocket, an old leather billfold I had carried for decades. I pulled it out with trembling fingers. Inside was a photograph, so faded the colors had turned sepia. 2 teenagers stood in front of Jefferson High School, his arm around my waist, my head on his shoulder. We were both smiling. So young, so sure the world was ours. Richard Thomas Blackwell. Below the photo, on a piece of yellowed paper, was a phone number. I had updated it over the years through mutual friends, though I never called. Richard Blackwell, tech entrepreneur and philanthropist, had returned to Oklahoma. He had built an estate just 40 miles from where I lived. The article showed a photo of him, older now, silver-haired, but still those same green eyes. It mentioned his charitable work, particularly in disaster relief. I had cut out that article, told myself it was just interesting to see an old friend doing well. But I knew the truth. I had kept it because some part of me had never let go. Now, sitting in a borrowed nightgown in a stranger's guest room, having been rejected by my own son, I stared at that phone number. What did I have to lose? The next morning, I woke before dawn. I had barely slept, my mind racing with fear and possibility. Martha had left coffee and muffins on the kitchen counter with a note saying they had gone to help with the relief efforts in town. I sat at their kitchen table, phone in one hand, the yellowed paper with Richard's number in the other. My finger hovered over the numbers. What would I even say? Hi, remember me from almost 50 years ago? My life fell apart, and I need help. It sounded pathetic. It was pathetic, but I had nowhere else to turn. I dialed before I could change my mind. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Maybe he wouldn't answer. Maybe this number was old, disconnected maybe. Hello. The voice was smooth, aged but still strong. Familiar in a way that made my heart skip. Richard. My voice came out as a whisper. This is Linda. Linda Mae Morrison. Well, Linda Hayes now. We went to Jefferson High together. Silence. Long enough that I thought he had hung up. Then, Linda. Just my name, but the way he said it held 47 years of memory. My God. I've thought about you for 47 years. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I hadn't expected that, hadn't expected the emotion in his voice, the immediate recognition, the weight of all that lost time in 3 words. I'm sorry to call like this. I didn't know who else. I broke down. The words tumbled out between sobs. The tornado, my house, my son's rejection, having nowhere to go, being 65 years old and homeless. Richard listened without interrupting. When I finally fell silent, exhausted from crying, he spoke. His voice was firm, protective, certain. Come home. Just 2 words, but they changed everything. Richard, I can't impose on you. We haven't spoken in. Linda, stop. Give me the address. It'll be there in 90 minutes. He was there in 87. I was standing on the Pattersons' front porch when a black luxury SUV pulled up. The door opened, and Richard stepped out. He was 70 now, his hair silver, his face lined with age, but he moved with confidence. He wore an expensive suit, but somehow it didn't look pretentious on him, just elegant, settled. When his eyes met mine, something inside me that had been clenched tight for 2 days finally released. He walked up the path, and without a word, opened his arms. I fell into them, sobbing against his chest. He smelled like expensive cologne and something else, something that reminded me of being 17 and safe and loved. I've got you, he murmured into my hair. I've got you now. After I calmed down, Richard thanked the Pattersons for their kindness. He was gracious, sincere, slipping them an envelope that I later learned contained $5,000 for their generosity. Then he helped me gather my few salvaged belongings and guided me to his car. The drive was quiet at first. I was too overwhelmed to speak, and Richard seemed to understand that I needed silence. As we left the destruction behind and drove into the rolling green hills of eastern Oklahoma, he finally spoke. I read about the tornado on the news yesterday. I wondered if you were in the path. I almost called the number I had for you, but I wasn't sure you'd want to hear from me after all this time. You have my number. He glanced at me, a small smile on his lips. Linda, I've always known where you were. Not in a creepy way, he added quickly, but we have mutual friends. They mentioned you over the years. I knew you married Tom Hayes, that he passed away young, that you had a son. I kept track because I needed to know you were happy. Were you happy? I asked. Successful, he said. Not always the same thing. We pulled off the highway onto a private road. Trees lined both sides, oak and elm, creating a canopy overhead. After about a mile, the trees opened up to reveal a stunning modern ranch house. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the morning sun. The architecture was clean, contemporary, but warm. It sat on what looked like hundreds of acres of rolling grassland. This is home, Richard said simply. He gave me a tour. The house was beautiful but not ostentatious. A chef's kitchen, a library with thousands of books, an art collection that included several pieces I recognized from museums, a music room with a grand piano. He showed me to a guest suite that was bigger than my entire destroyed house. It had its own sitting area, bathroom with a soaking tub, and a walk-in closet. Stay as long as you need, Richard said. Forever, if you want. That evening, we had dinner on the terrace. His chef, a kind woman named Patricia, prepared herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables. We ate as the sun set over the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Richard told me his story. After we lost touch, he threw himself into his studies, got his MBA, started working for a tech company in Silicon Valley in the early 80s, saw the potential of personal computing and started his own software company in 92. Sold it in 99 for $80 million, just before the dot-com crash. I got lucky with timing, he said. Invested wisely. Diversified. Built this place 5 years ago when I decided I was done with California. Wanted to come home. Why didn't you ever marry? I asked. He looked at me directly. Because I never got over you. The words hung in the air between us. I dated, he continued. Had a few long-term relationships. Good women, all of them. But there was always something missing. I thought maybe I was just not built for marriage, you know? But the truth was simpler. I was measuring everyone against a 17-year-old girl with brown eyes and a laugh that sounded like music. I didn't know what to say. I had spent my marriage to Tom, loving him, being faithful, building a life. But had I ever truly let go of Richard? Or had I, too, kept a corner of my heart reserved for what might have been? Before I could respond, Richard's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered. Blackwell here. I watched his expression change. His jaw tightened, and his eyes went cold. I see. When did this call come in? Just now? And what did he say exactly? A pause. No. Don't engage. I'll handle this personally. He hung up and looked at me, and I saw something in his face I hadn't seen before. Anger. That was my lawyer. Your son just called my office. He found out you're here with me. Has threatening legal action, claiming I'm taking advantage of a vulnerable elderly woman. The salmon I had eaten turned to lead in my stomach. Has also demanding to know your whereabouts and insisting that he has legal authority over your care. Richard's voice was ice. Linda, your son just made a very big mistake. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the luxurious bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning. How did Brian find out where I was? Why was he suddenly concerned about my welfare when he had refused to help me 24 hours ago? The answer came at 9 the next morning. Brian and Angela showed up at Richard's estate unannounced. I was having coffee on the terrace with Richard when Patricia came out, her face apologetic. Mr. Blackwell, there are 2 people at the gate claiming to be Mrs. Hayes' family. They're quite insistent. Richard looked at me. Do you want to see them? Part of me wanted to say no. But another part, the mother part that had loved Brian since the moment he was born, needed to understand. Let them in, I said. 5 minutes later, Brian and Angela walked onto the terrace. I barely recognized them. Brian wore an expensive suit I had never seen before. Angela was dressed head to toe in designer labels, dripping with jewelry. They were driving a brand new Mercedes that probably cost more than my destroyed house. Mom, Angela rushed forward, all concern and affection. We were worried sick about you. You disappeared without telling us where you were going. I stood, my coffee cup trembling in my hand. You told me your wife didn't want me there, Brian. You told me to find a shelter. Brian shot Angela a look, then forced a smile. Mom, you misunderstood. I was just stressed. Of course we would have made room for you. Our condo is small, but family comes first. That's not what you said. Look, Brian said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I had heard more and more over the years. We're here now, aren't we? Let's just forget about all that and focus on getting you settled somewhere appropriate. Richard stood. He didn't say anything, but his presence shifted the dynamic on the terrace. He was taller than Brian, broader, and he had a way of commanding space that came from years of running boardrooms. And you are? Brian asked, his tone just shy of rude. Richard Blackwell. I'm a friend of your mother's. Right, the high school boyfriend. Brian's laugh was bitter. Mom, can we talk privately? I wanted to say no, but old habits die hard. I nodded and followed Brian to the edge of the terrace, out of earshot of Richard and Angela. Mom, what are you doing? Brian hissed. This guy is obviously trying to manipulate you. You're vulnerable right now. As a millionaire. You need to be careful. Richard has been nothing but kind to me. Sure, now. But what does he want? Nobody does something for nothing. Brian glanced back at the house, his eyes calculating. Look, if you're going to be with someone wealthy, you need to protect yourself. Get things in writing. Protect your assets. What assets, Brian? I lost everything in the tornado. But there'll be insurance money, right? And if you and this guy get serious, there's estate planning to think about. You have to think about me. I'm your son. I should be taken care of. There it was. The truth. Naked and ugly. Your inheritance, I said slowly. That's what you're worried about. Don't make it sound like that. I'm just being practical. Angela and we've had some financial setbacks. My business isn't doing great. We were counting on, well, we thought you had life insurance, property value. Now, everything's gone. Angela appeared beside us. She put her hand on Brian's arm, but her eyes were on me. Linda, we're just concerned. You've been through trauma. You're not thinking clearly. We want what's best for you. What's best for you, you mean? I said. And my voice sounded strange to my own ears. Stronger than I felt. That's not fair, Brian said, his face reddening. After everything I've done for you, everything you've done for me, the words exploded out of me. I raised you alone, Brian. Your father died when you were 6. I worked 2 jobs. I wore shoes with holes in them so you could have new ones. I gave up dates, vacations, everything so you could have a good life. What have you done for me? I exist, Brian shouted. I gave you purpose. You'd have been nothing without me. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard appeared in the doorway. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a knife. I think it's time for you to leave. We're not going anywhere, Angela said. Linda is confused and needs her family. Linda is standing right here, I said, finding my voice. And she can speak for herself. I'm not confused. I'm angry. Richard stepped onto the terrace fully now. He was holding a document. Before you go, let me be perfectly clear about something. Linda owes you nothing, Brian. You abandoned her when she needed you most. Now you show up because you smell money. That's not, Brian started. This, Richard held up the document, is the call log from your conversation with Linda after the tornado. I had my people pull the phone records. Your exact words, as recorded by the cell tower data, were, "My wife doesn't want you here. Maybe you can stay at a shelter or with your church friends." There's no ambiguity. No misunderstanding. Brian's face went white. You have 30 seconds to leave my property. If you contact Linda again demanding anything, I will ensure that every penny you've ever borrowed from her, every sacrifice she made for you that you never appreciated, becomes very public knowledge. I have considerable resources and even more considerable patience for people who hurt those I care about. You can't threaten me, Brian said, but his voice wavered. That wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Angela grabbed her purse, preparing to leave, but in her haste, it slipped from her hands. The contents spilled across the terrace floor. I bent to help her pick things up. That's when I saw them. Mortgage default notices. 3 of them, bright red, stamped final notice. Credit card collection letters from at least 5 different companies. And a brochure. A glossy brochure for something called Meadowview Senior Living. I picked it up. It advertised itself as an affordable care facility for elderly residents. Someone, presumably Angela, had made notes in the margins. Low-cost options, Medicaid qualification, waiting list. Get on it early. The date on the notes was 3 months before the tornado. What is this? I held up the brochure, my hand shaking. Angela's face went from red to gray. That's not. We were just researching options. For the future. 3 months ago, I looked at Brian. You were planning to put me in a state-run home 3 months ago. Mom, it's not like that. We were just preparing. You're getting older. We thought eventually you might need care. I'm 65 years old, Brian. I'm healthy. I was living independently until a tornado destroyed my home. My voice was rising. You weren't researching for my benefit. You wanted me out of the way. We thought it would be better, Angela blurted out. Safer for you. And then we could sell your property. Handle your finances. Get out. My voice didn't sound like my own. It was the voice of a woman I didn't recognize. A woman who had finally had enough. Get out of here right now. Brian's face crumpled. For a second, I saw the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. But then his expression hardened. You're choosing him over your own son. No, I said. You chose yourself over your own mother. I'm just finally accepting that. They left. The Mercedes kicked up gravel as they sped down the driveway, and I stood on the terrace watching them go, feeling something break inside me that could never be repaired. Richard put his arm around my shoulders. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. I think I always knew, I whispered. I just didn't want to believe it. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange blur. Richard was patient with me, giving me space when I needed it, company when I didn't want to be alone. We fell into a rhythm that felt both new and ancient, like something we had done in another lifetime. Mornings, we had coffee on the terrace. Richard read the Wall Street Journal while I read novels from his extensive library. Afternoons, he worked in his home office while I explored the property, walking the trails that wound through his land. Evenings, we cooked together or Patricia prepared something special, and we talked for hours. Richard told me about his years in California, the loneliness of success, the emptiness of having everything except the one thing that mattered. I told him about my marriage to Tom, how he was a good man, a kind man, but how I always felt like I was living in the shadow of what could have been. Do you think we would have made it? I asked one evening. If my mother hadn't gotten sick, if I hadn't had to drop out of school, I think we would have had a chance, Richard said. But maybe we needed these years to become who we are now. Maybe this is our real beginning. I wanted to believe that. Richard took me shopping in Tulsa. He insisted on replacing everything I had lost: clothes, toiletries, a new laptop, photo albums to start fresh, even a phone with his number programmed as the first contact. Let me do this, he said when I protested. Let me take care of you the way I should have 47 years ago. I tried to feel guilty about accepting his generosity, but the truth was, it felt good to be cared for. For the first time in decades, I wasn't the one doing all the giving, but the peace didn't last. Word spread quickly in our small Oklahoma community. Linda Hayes, the tornado victim, was living with millionaire Richard Blackwell. The gossip traveled faster than the storm that destroyed my house. On Sunday, 3 weeks after the tornado, I went to church. My church, where I had been a member for 30 years. I thought it would be good to reconnect, to let people know I was okay, to thank those who had sent prayers and well wishes. The moment I walked in, I felt the shift. Women I had known for years whispered behind their hands. A few greeted me, but their smiles were tight, their words careful. Carol Ann Jenkins, Angela's mother, sat in the front row and didn't even turn around when I walked past. After the service, a group approached me in the parking lot. They were led by Carol Ann, and her expression was anything but Christian charity. Linda, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. We've all been so worried about you. I'm fine, thank you. Are you, though? This came from another woman, Diane something, whose last name I could never remember. Living with a man you barely know, at your age? It just seems inappropriate. Richard and I were high school sweethearts, I said, keeping my voice level. We've known each other for 50 years. Still, Carol Ann said, it looks bad, and poor Brian is beside himself with worry. Angela says he's devastated that you've turned your back on your family. The lies were so blatant I almost laughed. Almost. Brian told me his wife didn't want me in their home. He suggested I go to a shelter. That's not me turning my back on family. That's family turning its back on me. Oh, I'm sure there was a misunderstanding, Diane said. Sometimes in times of stress, we hear things that weren't meant the way they sounded. Maybe you're just confused from the trauma. Confused. That word again. as if being 65 meant my mind was failing, as if I couldn't trust my own memory or judgment. "I'm not confused," I said firmly. "Now, if you'll excuse me." I walked to my car, Richard's car, really, a tasteful sedan he had insisted I use. My hands shook as I started the engine. The rumors got worse over the next week. I heard them through the grapevine, through kind friends who thought I should know what was being said. Linda Hayes was a gold digger. She was using her trauma to manipulate a wealthy man. She had abandoned her son in his time of need. She was mentally unstable. She needed help but was too proud to accept it. Carol Ann Jenkins was leading the charge, painting her son-in-law as the devoted child and me as the ungrateful mother who chose money over family. Then, on a Tuesday morning 4 weeks after the tornado, 2 people arrived at Richard's estate. They were from Adult Protective Services. A kind woman named Sharon and a younger man named Marcus sat in Richard's living room and explained that a complaint had been filed. Someone was concerned that I was being financially exploited, that I might not be competent to make my own decisions, that I was being isolated from my family. "Who filed the complaint?" I asked, though I already knew. "I can't tell you that," Sharon said gently. "But we're required to investigate. It's just a precaution." They asked me questions about my mental state, my finances, my relationship with Richard. I answered everything honestly. Yes, I was staying with Richard. No, he hadn't asked me for money or access to my accounts. Yes, I was competent to make my own decisions. They had me complete a cognitive assessment. I passed every test easily. Mini mental state examination, clock drawing, memory recall. All normal for my age. Sharon seemed satisfied. "Mrs. Hayes, you clearly have full capacity. I'll note that in my report. But I do have to ask, do you feel safe here? Has anyone pressured you or made you feel obligated?" "I feel safer here than I have in years," I said honestly. After they left, Richard found me in the library, staring out the window. "I'm so sorry," I said. "I'm bringing all this trouble into your life. Maybe I should leave, find my own place. The insurance money should come through soon." Richard knelt beside my chair, taking my hands in his. "Linda, listen to me. I've waited 47 years for this. For you, a few small-minded people and your ungrateful son are not going to take you away from me. Not unless you want to go." "I don't want to go," I whispered. "Then stay." That evening, as we watched the sunset from the terrace, Richard turned to me with an intensity I hadn't seen before. "Linda, I know this is fast. I know we have decades to catch up on. But I also know that life is short and unpredictable. I watched a tornado take away everything you owned in minutes. I'm not wasting any more time." He stood, and then, to my shock, he got down on one knee. From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. "This was my grandmother's ring," he said, opening it to reveal a vintage sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. "I've kept it all these years, telling myself I'd know when the right moment came. Linda Mae Morrison Hayes, I loved you when we were 17, and I love you now. Will you marry me?" My heart felt too big for my chest. Tears streamed down my face. "Yes," I breathed. "Yes." He slipped the ring on my finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for me all along. We sat together, his arm around me, planning a small, simple wedding. Just us and a few close friends, nothing elaborate, just a new beginning. The next morning, I woke feeling happier than I had in years. Richard had already left for an early meeting with his financial advisor. I made coffee, humming to myself, looking at the sapphire on my finger and thinking about wedding dresses. The doorbell rang at 9. Patricia was off running errands, so I answered it myself. Angela stood on the doorstep, alone. Her makeup was smeared. She had a bruise on her left cheekbone and what looked like fingerprints on her upper arm. She was crying, mascara running down her face in black rivers. "Linda, please. I need help." Every instinct told me to slam the door, but something in her face, the genuine terror I saw there, made me hesitate. "What happened?" "It's Brian. Has has lost it, has become obsessed with money, with your money, with what he thinks you owe him, has gambling, Linda. He has debts. Bad people are after him. He hit me last night when I said we should just let you be happy. She held out her arms, showing me the bruises more clearly. I need help to leave him. I need money for a lawyer, for a place to stay. Please. I know I've been awful to you. I know I don't deserve it. But I don't know where else to go. I looked at this woman who had helped her husband plot to institutionalize me, who had stood by while he rejected me in my darkest hour, and I saw something in her eyes that made me pause. It looked like genuine fear, genuine regret. Come inside, I said. Richard returned home an hour later to find Angela sitting in the living room, telling me about Brian's gambling debts, his verbal abuse, the threatening phone calls they had been getting. She cried as she apologized for everything, swore she had been led astray by her mother's values, by a lifetime of being taught that money mattered more than people. Richard listened quietly. Then he excused himself to make a phone call. He returned 20 minutes later, his face grim. Angela, I just spoke with my private investigator, the one I keep on retainer for business matters. I had him do a quick check. Angela's face went pale. Your bruises are makeup. Stage makeup. Specifically, you were seen purchasing it at a theatrical supply store in Tulsa 2 days ago. The bruises on your arms were done with an eyeshadow palette. A convincing job. I'll give you that. Angela stood up. That's not. Furthermore, my investigator just spoke with your neighbor. Brian was home last night. You had friends over for dinner. There was laughing, music. No fighting. No violence. You can't prove. I can, Richard said calmly. I also can prove that you and Brian are in financial trouble, but not from gambling, from poor investments, overspending, and credit card debt from maintaining a lifestyle you can't afford. And I've seen enough cons in the business world to recognize the pattern. He sat beside me. I'm sorry. I know he's your son. As a stranger, I said. When did he become a stranger? The wedding was set for 3 weeks away. Small, intimate, just 12 guests. Richard's business partner and his wife, the Patterson family, who had sheltered me after the tornado, a few of Richard's longtime friends. My pastor, Richard's lawyer, drew up a prenuptial agreement, not because Richard wanted to protect his money from me, but to protect me from Brian. The prenup specified that my insurance settlement, which would be around $200,000, was mine alone. It couldn't be contested, couldn't be claimed by Richard in any hypothetical divorce, and most importantly, couldn't be accessed by Brian through any legal maneuvering. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I was in the library, looking at bridal magazines with Patricia, when the doorbell rang. Richard answered it. I heard voices in the foyer. Richard's, firm but not angry, and an older woman's voice, weak and trembling. Please, the woman said. I need to speak with Linda Hayes. It's important. I'm dying, and I need to clear my conscience. Richard appeared in the library doorway. Linda, there's someone here to see you. Her name is Dorothy Richardson. She says she used to work for me, back in California. She says she has something to tell you. The woman who entered the library was tiny, frail, maybe 75 years old. She had an oxygen tank on a small cart that she pulled behind her. Her skin had the gray pallor of serious illness. Mrs. Hayes, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't have much time. Cancer. Stage 4. A few weeks, maybe a month. I needed to tell you something before I go. I'm sorry you're ill, I said carefully. But I don't know you. No, but I know you. I've known about you for 47 years. She looked at Richard, her eyes filling with tears. I'm so sorry, Richard. I'm so sorry for what I did. Richard frowned. Dorothy, what are you talking about? She pulled a chair close and sat down heavily, wheezing. I was your secretary, 1978 to 1986. I was in love with you, Richard. Desperately, pathetically in love with you. You never knew. You were always professional, kind, but you never saw me that way. Dorothy, Richard said gently, You talked about Linda all the time those first few years. The girl you left behind. The girl you still loved. I hated her. I'd never even met her, but I hated her for having your heart when I wanted it so badly. I felt a cold dread building in my stomach. One day, a letter came. 1981. It was addressed to you, personal, from Linda Hayes in Oklahoma. I recognized the name immediately. I was sorting your mail, and I opened it. Richard went very still. She wrote that she was married, that she had a baby boy, but that she wanted you to know she never stopped loving you. She said Shed had to choose duty over her heart, but that she hoped you were happy, that she hoped you'd found someone wonderful, that you'd always be her first love. My hand flew to my mouth. I had written that letter right after Brian was born. I was hormonal, emotional, grieving the life I might have had. Tom had been at work, and I'd sat at my kitchen table and poured my heart out to a man I thought I'd never see again. I'd mailed it, then regretted it, then decided it didn't matter because Richard had probably moved on anyway. I destroyed it, Dorothy whispered. I threw it away. I told myself I was protecting you, Richard, from a married woman trying to keep you on the hook. But the truth is, I just wanted you for myself. I thought if enough time passed, you'd forget her, maybe turn to me. Richard's face had gone pale. You kept that letter from me. I did, and I've lived with that guilt every day since. It got worse when you never married, when you'd mention Linda in passing even years later, wondering what had happened to her. I destroyed your chance at closure, maybe your chance at happiness. Why are you telling us this now? I asked, my voice shaking. Because I'm dying, and I can't take this sin to my grave. And because she looked at me with desperate eyes. Someone came to see me last week. A man named Brian Hayes. Your son. He said he was digging into Richard's past, looking for anything he could use against him. He somehow found out I used to work for Richard, thought I might know secrets. I didn't tell him about the letter, but talking to him, it made me realize what I'd done. I'd kept two people apart who loved each other, and now that you'd finally found each other again, your own son was trying to tear you apart. I couldn't let that happen. I had to tell the truth. The room was silent except for Dorothy's labored breathing. Richard stood abruptly, walked to the window, his back to us. I could see his shoulders shaking. All those years, he said finally. I thought you'd forgotten me. I thought you were happy with your life. And I was just a fool holding on to a teenage dream. I never forgot you, I said. Not for one day. Dorothy was crying now, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. I'm so sorry. I know sorry isn't enough. I destroyed that letter and I destroyed 47 years you could have spent together. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know the truth. Richard turned around. His eyes were wet. He looked at Dorothy for a long moment, and I could see him struggling with anger, grief, and something that looked like pity. You're dying, he said finally. And you came here to confess. That took courage, even if it's 47 years too late. I can't say I forgive you. Not yet. But I understand why you're telling us. You can go with a clearer conscience. Dorothy nodded, stood slowly, and made her way to the door with her oxygen tank trailing behind her. After she left, Richard and I sat in silence for a long time. All those years, I finally said. We could have been in each other's lives. Not as a couple, maybe. I was married. But as friends, we could have known each other. She stole that from us, Richard said. But we can't change the past. We can only control what we do now. He came to me, pulled me to my feet, held me close. Maybe those years apart were necessary. Maybe we had to live full lives, have our own experiences, our own losses, to appreciate what we have now. Maybe this is exactly when we were supposed to find each other again. I wanted to believe that, but I couldn't stop thinking about all the missed birthdays, holidays, everyday moments we'd never get back. That evening, Richard's lawyer called. Brian had filed a formal petition to contest the prenuptial agreement. He was also filing for a competency evaluation, claiming I was not of sound mind to make major legal or financial decisions. A court date was set for 1 week before our wedding. "Has not going to stop," I said. "Then neither will we," Richard replied. His private investigator, a man named Marcus Chen who had come highly recommended, delivered his report the next day. It was worse than Wed imagined. Brian hadn't just mismanaged his finances. Had been embezzling from his own consulting company, blaming shortfalls on partners. One partner had already filed a complaint. Criminal charges were pending. Brian had gambling debts totaling over $75,000. Had taken out payday loans, used credit cards with usurious interest rates, borrowed from loan sharks. He was facing potential prison time. The insurance settlement from my destroyed home wasn't about inheritance or feeling entitled. It was about survival. Brian was desperate, cornered. And desperate people do dangerous things. "He needs that money for a legal defense," Richard said, reading the report. "And probably to pay off the worst of his debts before someone decides to break his legs." "Hes my son," I said numbly. "Hes also a grown man who made his own choices. You can't save him from the consequences of those choices, Linda. And hell pull you down trying." The hearing was scheduled for Monday. 5 days away. 5 days to prepare for my own son to try to have me declared incompetent. I had never felt so betrayed in my life. The weekend before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Brian as a little boy, how he used to curl up in my lap when he was scared, how he'd bring me dandelions and call them flowers, how he'd said "I love you, Mama" every night before bed until he turned 13 and decided it wasn't cool anymore. Where had that little boy gone? Richard found me on the terrace at 3 a.m, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. "You don't have to do this," he said gently. "We can give him the money. $200,000 means nothing to me. If it would buy you peace." "It won't," I said. "It'll never be enough. And even if I gave him every penny, he'd just blow through it and come back for more. No. This has to end." Monday morning, we drove to the courthouse in Oklahoma City. Richard's lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Morrison, no relation, met us outside. "I'm not going to lie to you, Linda. These hearings can be brutal. Brian's lawyer is going to paint you as a confused, grief-stricken widow who's being manipulated. They'll bring up your age, your recent trauma, your sudden relationship with Richard. You need to be strong." "I am strong," I said. "I raised a son alone. I buried a husband. I survived a tornado. I can survive this." The courtroom was small, stuffy, filled with afternoon light that made the wood paneling glow. The judge was a woman in her 50s, named Judith Carroll. She had kind eyes but a no-nonsense demeanor. Brian and Angela sat on one side with their lawyer, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. I sat on the other side with Richard and Patricia. I hadn't seen my son in weeks. He looked terrible. Thinner, dark circles under his eyes, a nervous energy that made him twitch and fidget. For a moment, I felt a maternal urge to go to him, to ask if he was eating enough, sleeping enough. Then I remembered the nursing home brochures, the cold rejection on the phone, the cons and manipulations. The judge called the hearing to order. Brian's lawyer spoke first. He painted a picture of a vulnerable elderly woman who had suffered tremendous trauma and was now making rash decisions. He brought up my sudden engagement to Richard, implying I was being swept up in a fantasy to escape reality. "Mrs. Hayes has known Mr. Blackwell for less than 2 months in any meaningful capacity," he said. "Yet she's agreed to marry him, signed legal documents, and cut off communication with her only child. This is not the behavior of someone thinking clearly." Then it was our turn. Patricia called me to the stand. I swore to tell the truth, and then she asked me to tell my story. I told everything. My life with Brian, the sacrifices it'd made, the love it poured into raising him, Tom's death, working 2 jobs, putting Brian through college. I told about the tornado, the phone call, Brian's exact words, "My wife doesn't want you here. Maybe you can stay at a shelter." I heard gasps from the gallery. A few people in the back were taking notes. I realized with a start that there were journalists there. This was news. Wealthy tech millionaire, tornado survivor, family drama. I presented evidence. Text messages Brian had sent months before the tornado, complaining to friends about having to deal with me eventually. The nursing home brochures, financial records showing that I had lent Brian $15,000 for his wedding and never been repaid. I loved my son with everything I had, I said, my voice breaking. But love isn't supposed to be a transaction. I didn't give him everything expecting payment, but I also don't think it's wrong to expect basic decency in return. Patricia then showed the court the recorded cell tower data from the phone call after the tornado. Brian's words were right there, cold and clear. No ambiguity, no misunderstanding. She presented medical evaluations showing I was cognitively sound, psychological assessments showing no signs of diminished capacity or undue influence. Then Richard took the stand. He told our story. High school sweethearts, lost time. The letter I'd written that he never received. Our reconnection after 47 years. I love Linda, he said simply. I loved her when she was 17, and I love her now. The prenup protects her, not me. If she wanted to take every penny I have, I'd give it to her gladly. But that's not who she is. She's not with me for money. She's with me because we're two people who found each other again and refuse to waste whatever time we have left. The judge called a recess. We waited in a small room, not talking, just holding hands. When we returned, it was Brian's turn. He took the stand, and his lawyer asked him questions designed to portray him as the concerned son. But Patricia's cross-examination was devastating. She brought up his embezzlement charges, the gambling debts, the loan sharks. She produced evidence that Brian had contacted Dorothy Richardson, trying to dig up dirt on Richard. Isn't it true, Mr. Hayes, that you don't care about your mother's well-being at all? You care about her insurance settlement. You need that money to pay for legal defense and gambling debts, don't you? That's not. I love my mother. You love her $200,000 insurance payout. Objection. Brian's lawyer shouted. Sustained, the judge said. Miss Morrison, stick to questions. But the damage was done. Then Angela took the stand. She tried to play the concerned daughter-in-law, but Patricia tore that apart too. She showed evidence of the makeup bruises, the theatrical supply purchase, the fake domestic violence story. You tried to con Linda into giving you money by pretending to be an abuse victim. Patricia said flatly. Isn't that correct? Angela's face crumpled. We needed help. We're desperate. That's not an answer to my question. Finally, Brian's lawyer rested his case. The judge looked tired. She shuffled papers, then looked up at all of us. I've been on the bench for 22 years, she said. I've seen a lot of family disputes, but this one breaks my heart. She looked directly at Brian. Mr. Hayes, I understand you're in financial difficulty. I understand you're facing serious legal troubles, but that doesn't give you the right to exploit your mother. Your behavior after the tornado was reprehensible. Your attempts to have her declared incompetent are transparent and frankly offensive. Brian's face went red, then pale. Mrs. Linda Hayes is clearly of sound mind. She's made her own choices, and those choices are protected by law. This court finds no evidence of diminished capacity or undue influence. Mr. Hayes, your petition is denied. She banged her gavel. Furthermore, I'm issuing a protective order. Mr. Hayes, you are not to contact your mother unless she initiates contact. You are not to go within 500 feet of her or Mr. Blackwell's property. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. Given your pending criminal charges, I suggest you focus on your own legal troubles rather than harassing your mother. Brian stood up, his chair scraping loudly. This is insane. She's my mother. Everything she has should be mine. Mr. Hayes, sit down, the judge said sharply. Your sense of entitlement is stunning. Your mother owes you nothing. She raised you, loved you, sacrificed for you. The fact that you can't see that shows a fundamental failure of character on your part. But, Brian looked around wildly. Mom, please, I'm going to prison. I need help. You're my mother. You have to help me. I stood up slowly. Richard tried to stop me, but I shook my head. I needed to say this. Brian, I loved you more than life itself. From the moment you were born, you were my whole world. I would have died for you without a second thought. My voice was shaking but clear. But love isn't supposed to be a transaction. You didn't reject a mother. You rejected a person who would have moved heaven and earth for you. I hope you find your way. I hope you learn from this. But I can't save you anymore. You have to save yourself. Brian started crying. Real tears this time, not manipulation. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was just scared. I made so many mistakes. Please don't give up on me. I'm not giving up on you. I'm giving up on being the only one who fights for our relationship. When you're ready to be a real son, not just someone looking for money, it'll be here. But I won't wait forever. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. Richard followed me. Patricia gathered her papers and joined us in the hallway. Brian ran after us. Mom, wait! Mom! Security stopped him. The protective order was already in effect. I didn't look back. In the parking lot, as we were getting into Richard's car, Angela appeared. She looked different. Her expensive clothes were gone, replaced with jeans and a simple t-shirt. No jewelry. Her face was bare of makeup, and she looked younger, more real. Linda, wait. Please. I turned, exhausted. What do you want, Angela? Nothing. I don't want anything. I left him. I left Brian. I filed for divorce this morning. I stared at her. I know you have no reason to believe me, but watching you in there, hearing you stand up for yourself, it changed something in me. My mother raised me to see relationships as transactions. She taught me that money was more important than people. I became just like her. But you showed me what real strength looks like. She wiped her eyes. I'm living with my sister now. I got a job at a grocery store. I'm in therapy. I'm trying to figure out who I am without all the greed and manipulation. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you made a difference. You changed me. She walked away before I could respond. Richard put his arm around me. You okay? I don't know, I said honestly. But I will be. We drove home in silence, and when we got to the estate, I collapsed on the couch and cried for an hour. I cried for the son I'd lost, for the relationship that could never be repaired, for the little boy who used to think I was his hero. But somewhere in those tears, I also felt something else. Relief. Freedom. The weight of trying to save someone who didn't want to be saved had finally lifted. 2 weeks later, Richard and I got married. The ceremony was simple, held on the terrace of his estate with the Oklahoma sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. I wore a simple ivory dress that Richard had helped me pick out. He wore a dark suit and couldn't stop smiling. The Patterson family came, Martha crying happy tears through the whole ceremony. Richard's business partner gave a toast about second chances and the persistence of true love. My pastor, who had stood by me through all the gossip, performed the ceremony. Do you, Richard Thomas Blackwell, take Linda Mae Hayes to be your lawfully wedded wife? I've been waiting 47 years to say this. I do. And do you, Linda Mae Hayes, take Richard Thomas Blackwell to be your lawfully wedded husband? I looked at this man who had opened his home and his heart to me when I had nothing, who had protected me, stood by me, reminded me that I was worthy of love and respect. I do. When we kissed, everyone cheered, and I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Hope. Over the next 6 months, Richard and I built a life together. We established the Hayes Blackwell Foundation for Disaster Relief, specifically focused on helping elderly people displaced by natural disasters. We funded rebuilding projects across Oklahoma and neighboring states. We provided temporary housing, counseling, financial assistance. I became an advocate, speaking at community centers and churches about resilience, about rebuilding, about the importance of knowing your worth. I told my story, and people listened. Other women, other mothers who had been taken for granted, reached out to share their own experiences. My insurance settlement came through. $200,000. I put half of it into the foundation. The other half I kept as my own security, my own independence. Richard had more money than we could spend in 3 lifetimes, but having my own funds mattered to me. It was a symbol of my autonomy. 6 months after our wedding, a letter arrived. The return address was the Muskogee County Correctional Facility. My hands shook as I opened it. The handwriting was Brian's, but different somehow. Less rushed, more careful. "Dear Mom," it began. "I'm in prison. 18 months for embezzlement, though with good behavior it might be less. I spend a lot of time thinking about how I got here, not just the crimes I committed, but the person I became. I've been in therapy, mandatory at first, but then I started actually participating. I'm learning about things I never wanted to face, how Dad's death affected me, how I resented you for being strong when I felt weak, how I learned to see relationships as transactions instead of connections. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I'm not even sure I deserve it. I'm definitely not asking for money or help. My lawyer is court-appointed, and that's fine. I need to face the consequences of my choices. I'm writing because I want you to know that I'm working on becoming someone worthy of being your son again. Not for what I can get from you, just to be worthy. I heard you got married. I hope you're happy. I hope Richard treats you the way you deserve to be treated, the way I never did. I don't have a timeline for when he'll be ready to talk to you. I don't have expectations. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying, really trying. Your son." Brian, I read the letter 3 times, then showed it to Richard. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to write back," I said. "Not with promises, not with money, just with an open door. Just with hope," I wrote. "Dear Brian, I'm proud that you're facing your issues honestly. Growth is painful, but it's the only path forward. I'll be here when you're ready. Really ready? Love always, Mom." I didn't hear back for months, but that was okay. Some healing takes time. On our first anniversary, Richard surprised me with a gift. He took me to the site of my destroyed home. The land had been cleared, the debris removed, but I hadn't been back since the tornado. Standing there now, in the middle of what used to be my living room, I felt the weight of loss, but also something else, something lighter. "I have something to show you," Richard said. He walked me to the edge of the property, where the land sloped down toward the creek. There, nestled among newly planted trees, was a beautiful building. Modern but warm, with large windows and a welcoming entrance. "Morrison House," the sign read. "A safe place for new beginnings. It's a community center," Richard explained. "For tornado survivors, support groups, resource distribution, temporary housing coordination, all funded by our foundation. I named it after your maiden name, your identity before you became anyone's wife or mother. Just Linda Mae Morrison, the girl who survived and kept surviving." I couldn't speak. Tears streamed down my face as I walked through the building. There were comfortable meeting rooms, a small library, a kitchen for community meals, offices for counselors and social workers. In the main room, there was a plaque, dedicated to all those who lost everything and found the strength to rebuild. "Your story isn't over. It's just beginning." That evening, sitting on our terrace watching the sunset, I reflected on everything that had happened. The tornado, the rejection, the reconnection, the betrayal, the triumph. "What did you learn from all this?" Richard asked softly. I thought about it for a long moment before answering. "I learned that loving yourself isn't selfish. I spent so much of my life being what others needed. A good daughter, a good wife, a good mother. I forgot to be a whole person. I learned that you can't pour from an empty cup." I looked at Richard. "I learned that sometimes the people you sacrifice everything for won't appreciate it, and that's not your failure. It's theirs. I learned that at 65, you can start over. You can lose everything and gain everything. The tornado didn't just take my house. It cleared the ground for a new foundation." Richard squeezed my hand, and I learned that some love doesn't fade. It waits. My phone buzzed. A text from Angela. She had sent a photo of herself at a community college orientation, smiling genuinely. The text read, "Enrolled in social work program. Thank you for showing me what strength looks like." Another text came through. It was from Sarah Patterson, the daughter of the family who had sheltered me. She had just graduated from a disaster relief coordinator program funded by our foundation. She sent a picture of herself in her new uniform, thanking me for giving her a career path she never would have considered. I showed Richard. He kissed my forehead. "You turned your worst day into someone else's best chance." I looked out over the land Richard and I now shared. I thought about the girl I was at 17, in love with Richard, planning a future. I thought about the young mother I became, the widow, the rejected parent. And now, the woman who finally came home to herself. "The tornado took my house," I said out loud. "My son broke my heart. But I found my way back to love. And I found my way back to me." I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt taken for granted by the people you love most? Have you ever had to choose between being loyal to family and being true to yourself? It's one of the hardest decisions we face. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched you, if it reminded you that it's never too late to start over, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about resilience, second chances, and finding strength in unexpected places. And please share this with someone who might need to hear that they're not defined by their losses, but by what they choose to build next. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here, for caring, for understanding that we all carry pain, and we all deserve the chance to heal. I wish you courage when you need to set boundaries. I wish you wisdom to know your worth. And I wish you love that waits, love that persists, love that reminds you of who you've always been underneath all the roles you've played. Remember, you are not your losses. You are not what was taken from you. You are what you choose to build next. Don't be afraid to start over. Don't be afraid to choose yourself. And don't be afraid to let love, in whatever form it takes, carry you home. The tornado took my home, but it couldn't take my spirit. My son broke my heart, but he couldn't break my will to keep living, keep loving, keep growing. And in the end, I found something I didn't even know I was looking for: myself. If you're going through a storm right now, whether it's wind and rain or betrayal and heartbreak, hold on. The other side is coming, and when you get there, you might just find that you're stronger than you ever imagined. Take care of yourselves, choose yourselves, and know that it's never, ever too late for a new beginning.